and hearing his teaching. And I think even, the apostles probably enjoyed watching Jesus go toe-to-toe with the Pharisees and with the leaders of the temple, and kind of, knocking them down a peg. Every time they challenged him, he always kind of embarrassed them. But this gospel that we heard this morning is in chapter 8. It's really the center of the gospel. Mark's gospel has 16 chapters. And this gospel marks a turning point. St. Peter had just said that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ. And then Jesus starts to talk about bearing the cross. And not only that he is going to bear a cross, but that they also had to follow him bearing the cross. Now, for us today, the cross is a symbol that we use. But in Jesus' day, the cross was an instrument the Romans used for torture and for terror, to make people submit to Roman power and might. And so it was a terrifying thing that hung over the heads of all those who were not Roman citizens, like Jesus and the apostles. So this was very hard for them to hear. They've been going along with Jesus, kind of, well, the miracles are cool, and we like what he's saying, and all of this stuff. But now all of a sudden, there's something hard that's difficult. How can the Messiah, the Christ, be crucified? And so Peter even goes, you can tell how difficult it was for the apostles, because Peter even goes to Jesus and says, yeah, no, you're wrong, Jesus. And Jesus slaps him down hard, right? Get behind me, Satan. So in the process of Jesus' preaching, now his whole message begins to change. Right? And for the disciples who have been kind of spectators, who have been watching Jesus all this time, now there's something more. There's a commitment that's necessary. That they're called to a deeper level of discipleship, which means embracing the cross. Now, if you read the Gospel of Mark, the very next scene is the Transfiguration, where Jesus takes Peter, James, and John out on Tabor, and he's transfigured. He shows his divine glory to them in the company of Moses and Elijah, to show that he is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, the whole Old Testament. And when we celebrate that feast in August, on August 6th, we sing the hymn that says, "You were transfigured, so that when they should see you crucified, they would know that you suffer willingly, and that you are verily the splendor of the Father." The cross is planted here in the center of the church on this third Sunday of Great Lent. And we made a procession with it at the beginning of the Divine Liturgy. And it will remain here for the whole fourth week of Great Lent. Because this week is the turning point of the season. Wednesday is exactly halfway through from the beginning of Lent to Pascha. And those of us who were here for morning prayer, we heard the first hints of the resurrection. Some of our favorite music that's sung this morning. And so we're starting to kind of turn our heads toward the coming feast of Jesus' resurrection, having suffered his passion and his death. And so for those of us who have been keeping a very strict Lent, even if we can't keep the whole fast because of health reasons or whatever else, at least we've been intentional about increasing our prayer and our fasting and our almsgiving. And for those who have been neglectful, who have made lots of excuses about why they can't celebrate the season of Lent, at any rate, for all of us, now it starts to change. We hear in the next weeks that being a Christian means embracing the cross, that it's difficult. We can wander and fumble through our lives being self-centered, kind of focusing just on ourselves. But the Christian life is about taking up the cross, bearing the yoke of the cross, struggling against sin, and struggling to love God and our neighbor as ourselves. It's hard. Anyone who thinks being a Christian is easy is missing a big chunk of Christianity. And every year, I try to preach about fasting in a very positive way. I mean, you don't have to fast, and I don't ever want anyone to feel like they're shamed into fasting or anything like that. And I've found over the years that approach means that someone who has never fasted before, is in the right place at the right time this year to say, okay, this year I'm going to do it, And oftentimes someone will come and say to me, so-and-so's keeping the fast this year. And so I love that. I love that, that this kind of part of our spirituality, sometimes we're just in the right place at the right time to hear it. The apostles themselves now are also coming to terms with the full message of the gospel, choosing to have to embrace the cross for themselves. And every time that we make the sign of the cross, we renew our commitment to the Christian life. We renew our commitment to discipleship that was begun at baptism, taking up our cross and following Jesus. But we know that the story doesn't end with struggle and suffering, that Jesus, through his resurrection, has transformed the cross from an instrument of suffering and pain and fear to a sign of victory. The victory of Jesus conquering sin and death. And so, when we make the sign of the cross, we not only embrace the difficulty and the struggle that the cross represents, but we also embrace the end of the story. We know that the end of discipleship is victory with Christ when he comes with his holy angels in the glory.